The following podcast may include coarse language, graphic content, and politically and/or religiously sensitive material. Those of you who are offended by such content should fuck off. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Daemoneye podcast, episode 13. Spooky. Roleplaying aids, props, and accouterments. Again, this is Tristan Eifler.
I'm some animated corpse.
That was J. Tyler Burrell, smartass. And this is the Daemoneye podcast, the podcast where we discuss tabletop, video, and PC role-playing games, science, technology, geek culture, and all possible interpretations of the phrase oral fixation. All of them.
Yeah, who would have ever thought about having mouths stapled to people's walls?
I was more referring to, like, fixing problems with your mouth, like tears and so forth, and you had to make it dirty, didn't you, Tyler?
Tough lug nuts.
So, let's go ahead and get this party started. Let's begin with the standard, how has life been for you over the last couple months or weeks? Tyler, you go first.
Frying. Calculus class, the volume of homework is kicking my ass.
And I am teaching chemistry, so I also have schoolwork to deal with, although it's from the other side. It's actually been quite pleasant, apart from spilling a little bit of iodine on my hand during the Wednesday course. That was easily washed off.
Oh, it could have been worse.
Yeah, I could have...
a lot worse.
Yes, this is Chem 305, so it's basically high school chemistry. And we do have Bunsen burners, so there is a chance they'll blow us all up. But actually, my students have been doing very well, surprisingly well, considering that, again, this is basically high school chemistry for college students, so can't complain beyond that. I am just so happy it's finally cooling off here. It feels like autumn again. I am forever grateful for that. You, Tyler?
Yeah, I was out and about earlier right before noon, and for once I could actually, wear pants when biking around for a short distance, instead of like worrying about whether or not it'd be illegal, whether or not I'd get caught streaking on a bicycle.
Yes, I think I've mentioned this in an older episode of the podcast, but autumn/fall, favorite season, favorite month is October, and that's coming up very soon. And also, we both had birthdays this month, don't we, Tyler?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did.
I am not saying what mine is.
Mine's on the 12th. I don't care.
Mine is sometime this month, evidently, since you gave it away, you asshole.
I'm sorry. I'm sure people won't use it to hack into whatever account you have.
Well, now they have a 1 in 30 or 1 in 31 chance instead of 1 in 30 chance instead of a 1 in 365 chance. So I blame you.
Considering all the safeguards and paranoid passphrases you've probably put into every account you have, the chances of them breaking into your accounts are slim to none, even with the addition of your possible birthday.
Hey, some of my passwords, when they have an open-ended field, are entire song lyrics written in leet speak.
You just participated in a little bit of social engineering there, Tyler, by admitting that.
Yeah, but do you know how many fucking song lyrics there are?
Yes, but then they know... Well, we go on and on about this, but let's just move on for the sake of time. So, life actually hasn't been that shitty recently for both of us. Still shitty, but in different degrees. What was that quote from Deadpool, the movie? Life is the occasional pleasant... Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, life is... Or was it life is a shit sandwich or life is a shit sandwich or a car wreck or something like that with brief interludes of happiness.
Yes, that sounds about right. All right, so that's our social shit out of the way. Let's talk about Daemoneye stuff, all right? What sort of projects are you working on right now, Tyler? Of course, you're busy with homework right now, so have you managed to make time for any of that?
No, I haven't even managed to make time to clean up my freaking mess from last game night.
That sucks. Well, I've had a little more progress. I'm wrapping up the Old Wounds short. At this point, it's basically a novella. So that'll probably be done in about 2 to 3 chapters. I've actually got a little bit of progress on the Universal Decay adaptation of the Lycanthrope Club. And forgive me, Tyler, and I feel the same way you do about this, actually, but Daemoneye Publishing now has a Twitter account. I know, I felt dirty creating it, but it is basically free publicity, and it's a way for us to let our many fans, or I'm not sure if we can really use plural here, know when we're releasing a new product, so it's there. I probably won't update it that often, and I'm really not going to follow anybody. But it's there, and occasionally there might be some news there, and it has a big, scary logo on it, so check it out. Or not. And I've also...
Probably the latter option.
Yeah. But it's there. Yeah, with some exceptions, I don't care much for social media. Your Facebooks, your Twitters, your Tumblrs, etc., etc. It makes me sound like a curmudgeon, but it is quite a quagmire. There are some exceptions, of course. My DA account, obviously, and LinkedIn, because if you're any sort of professional, it's more or less you have to have it.
Obligatory.
Thank you.
The word you're looking for is obligatory, boys and girls.
Thank you. And speech part of my brain is going to get a good whipping later on for failing to recall that word. So. That's pretty much it for Daemoneye projects. Anything in plan, Tyler? And if you have some time,
I plan on freaking finishing the damn magic spells and magic items entries for Dragonfire.
And that will pretty much be it.
Well, I don't know about pretty much be it, but honestly, with everything else going on, that's pretty much what I've decided. Yeah, I'm dumping everything else and I'm focusing on that. If something else comes up, like during the weekend or during the weekend game when we're just dicking around, and I'm there, obviously I'm not writing anything, but I have the files that we're messing with for whatever we're playing open. I'll make an edit, but that's it.
Yeah, better than nothing. Yeah. So sounds good. Hopefully we'll see the book available sometime around Christmas or maybe a little New Year's, but it's. Especially for you, writing is a tough and unpredictable process.
Yeah, I just have so little functional time every week that if I take a class, it eats up almost all of it.
Well, at least you don't have to drive all the way across the causeway to get to your college these days.
That's true. My travel time has dropped from 2 hours one way to an hour one way.
All right, so that pretty much covers that. So we move on to the next part, Q&A, and we actually have a decent number of questions this episode. Over 9, I think.
Yes, but are any of the questions decent?
A couple of them, and as I promised my followers on my DA account, I will pick one person here who asks a question, and I'll write a story for them, 3,050 words minimum. I'll pick that.
So the rest of the questions are filthy?
I wouldn't say that. So let's start with a good one here. This question comes from Hexen109. I think it could apply to both of us. Most of these are directly to me, but I think Tyler could answer this one as well. For someone who wants to pick up writing professionally, is there any literature you'd recommend? I'll answer this first. My answer is just keep reading, and I mean a lot of things. Becoming a good writer is kind of like eating well. You have to have a healthy diet. So read classics, read new books, read weird books, read magazines, read even junk food things like manga or thing here is to read a lot. That's the one place where the diet metaphor falls away because volume. Keep reading, read a lot, read a variety. Don't just read one one series of novels or one author, variety and volume. That's all I really have to say.
Two books I would recommend. First off is the Monomyth by Joseph Campbell. And the second one is Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Good examples. But again, my answer to that is a lot.
You need an idea about foundational structure, and you can't really get that by reading stuff that have multiple different types of structural writing. But if you read those two books, admittedly, Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire is more than one volume, so good luck on that. But if you manage to get through those, you'll see the patterns that people write into. That isn't to say that you should write into the same pattern, because you'll also notice that the good books use that or have that pattern as like a background, and then they deviate from it.
True, I suppose there are some books, not just those two, which you can consider keystone ones, which are good, just overall good in general for learning how to write. But
after all, haven't you ever read a book that you've never picked up before, and found yourself going, I wonder if this will happen on the next page, and you're right. And then I wonder if this will happen in the next chapter, and you're right. And then you wonder, and you go, I wonder if this is how the book is going to end, and you're right.
Yeah, but assuming you have at least some foundational writing ability, grammar, etc., and an idea of how plot works, which if you don't you really need to take some classes or start reading some keystone books. My answer again is just volume and quality to a certain extent. All right. So again, good question.
Really, all classes on writing teach you how to do is write press releases.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, if you're not just necessarily a class, but a writer's clique where you read each other's work and critique it. I went to a writer's salon in Davis for a while, and it was actually fairly helpful. That I think is another good way to do it. But I think we're spending too much time on this question. Again, good question, but we need to move on. This one is from Unartistic, which I think is a revamp of an earlier question. Do you plan to rewrite the third book in the Lycanthrope Club? And again, the answer is yes, it will be done when it's done. All right, moving on. Okay. Oh, here's another good one, which actually could apply to either of us, Tyler. This is from Teria Axe. What are your greatest motivators for your writing process? What keeps you going? What are your future plans for upcoming stories? Since you and Tyler are called Daemoneye Publishing, what exactly do you have or will you publish? Okay, wow. For me, greatest motivation, good question. I mean, I just like writing. I enjoy it. I look forward to it some nights. Some nights I'm not really in the mood for it, but you have to keep doing it. It's a bit like exercise. Some days you really want to go running on the treadmill and work out all that frustration, energy, and anxiety. And some nights you're just, I just rather sit in. But writing is like a muscle. You have to keep doing it, and you enjoy it sometimes just for the process, for the intellectual stimulation. But you have to do it sometimes even when you're not feeling up to it, if only for the practice. The key to writing is to write, to steal a phrase from Finding Forrester. I think that was the title of the film.
For me, my motivation is a sense of exploration. I love discovering new problems and new solutions to those problems, and then I just get lost down the rabbit hole, going further and further because every solution suggests more problems, and every problem suggests different possible solutions.
As you might tell, I'm more of a narrative writer, and he's more of a rules writer or rules designer, which makes sense.
And world designer, don't forget.
Oh, yeah. A bit of that, too, because we have kind of a mixture of both the rules and the narrative come together. Future plans, we've mentioned this before. Want to eventually finish the goddamn re-edit of Lycanthrope Club Book 3. I have some ideas for a pan-dimensional multiverse I might get into later on. Bunch of plans, but most of them are pretty formative at this point.
World domination.
Tyler, I meant as in plans for upcoming stories and writings, not your overall plan.
Oh. You see, we have to be specific about these when you ask questions, people.
I think he was.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I want to finish Dragonfire, get that one out the door, finish the edits on the latest version of Dead Stars, and then go into development on, or I should say, finish development on Walking the Black, the setting expansion from Dead Stars. I have all the programs and everything I need to actually do the star maps done. I just have to draw the damn star maps and then start filling in the entries for the different stellar systems.
Yeah,
that is going to be a pain in the ass.
You might have to purchase or download a special program for that.
Why? I already wrote them.
Oh, never mind. All right, good. Another good question. That was from Tyria X.
It's just that when you have stars that are really close to each other, and it puts the designation for the star printed next to it, the two designations can overlap and become illegible. Mm-hmm. So I have to go through and physically erase both designations, then write one to one side and the other to the other side.
Well, you could always try doing a optical parallax map. Two images, one for right, one for left. People cross their eyes, and it creates a pseudo three-dimensional space. But that wouldn't really work well, actually.
Not considering how it's going to be printed in a book.
Well, no.
A cheap book.
Well, actually, it could work there, but it's just not provide enough detail. All right, so moving on. Here's a simple one with a simple answer from JKC258. Do you ever fantasize about being a character in your stories? No. Okay. Here's one from another one from JKC258. I'll answer this one also because that was a short question, short answer. What makes you interested in werewolves? I don't know. I kind of give a long-winded explanation that in book 1, where I kind of describe the idea of the Jungian psychology, where you have the shadow personality representing the restrained, unconscious, primal urges and instincts of man versus the civilized side. A bit like the id and ego from Freud, but a little more complex in how it kind of... The idea of the werewolf myth fits into that. It's just kind of an interesting exploration. There are all of other reasons. That's the usual one I give when ask that question. One more from Laz Troferier. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Why do you think people like these kind of stories, and what attracts them to Sid stories? Some people like vampires, some people like mummies, some people like werewolves, some people like jacking off to werewolves and mummies and vampires. I don't know. People have a lot of different reasons for why they read certain stories that feature mythological creatures. I like to think that some people like it for the mind for the characters and for the I wouldn't call it original, but at least somewhat different take on werewolves. But that's the answer you're going to get.
Some people like pistachio ice cream.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that pretty much covers it. Again, good crop of questions this time. I guess my little ploy succeeded. Thanks for asking. So now I'll go ahead and randomly determine whose question I'm going to answer. Who I'm going to write a story for. I'll roll this 12-sided die I have here. This is intense.
Hey.
All right. Let's see. And the winner is Laztrofyer. That's Laztrohyer. Congratulations. I'll go ahead and I'll message you, and we can work out the story. Congrats. All right. And that covers the Q&A section. Anything to include, Tyler?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Let's go ahead and get on to the actual topic of the podcast. Role-playing game aids, props, and accoutrements. So, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, role-playing games, one of the things about it is that, in theory, all you really need are a bunch of people who know there are diceless games, there are games where it's very simple rules, some games with basically no rules, and that's really all you need. That's the nice thing about role-playing, tabletop role-playing games. But most games have some accoutrements, things you need to play a more satisfying game in some people's minds. So what would those be, Tyler?
Well, everybody needs dice. Or I should say, every modern game that has any degree of popularity needs dice.
Well, there are some diceless games like Amber, for example, and What dice are based...
Remember what I said about has any popularity?
True. I mean, there are some diceless games which try to take kind of a more... what's the word I'm looking for? Artistic bent, or kind of a more... Well, I wouldn't... There's another word I'm looking for. I can't... Go ahead.
Thematic, I believe, is the word you're looking for. Like the original Deadlands game, where your random generation system was based on a poker hand.
Well, I mean, any random generator. I'm thinking about games without random generators. I mean, dice or cards or little chits. It doesn't matter. But generally, you need dice or some random number generator to create randomness, to create tension, to create possibilities. Otherwise, it really is basically cowboys and Indians, or I shot you, no, I shot you. I mean, it's even possible to make a satisfactory game without... how plausible do you think games without random number generators are, Tyler?
I would have to say possible, but not really feasible in the long term. Simply because the whole point of a random number generator is to take into account the uncontrollable variables that you cannot predict.
So are there any examples that you think of which don't use random number generators and is still a satisfactory game? I mean, not just, say, role-playing
Honestly,
games.
no.
I can't either.
Honestly, no.
No. There are games where there is no randomness, to be fair. I mean, like chess, for example, checkers. Those games are completely deterministic, depending upon the skills of the player. I mean, in theory, Battleship is kind of could also be not really random either, because it also depends upon the individuals and decisions they make. Even though there is,
but those aren't role-playing games. The point of a role-playing game is to model reality, or a pseudo version of reality. But reality is filled with so many factors that cannot be accounted for, that even though our physical world is at least on the macro scale, as far as we can tell, completely deterministic, it has the appearance of randomness because of the butterfly effect.
Well, how about this? What if we played a version of D&D where there were no dice, and instead you always took average?
It would be feasible, but it wouldn't be very fun, because you would end up in situations where you could never hit something, and other situations where you could never miss, which is completely different from reality.
Well, what if there were a set of rules where if you take a +2 on this one turn, on the next turn you take a -2 on something? Could it work then?
Then you're just back in the same situation. On turn A, you always hit. On turn B, you always run. On turn C, you always hit. On turn D, you always run.
Yes, but what if you moved back and forth? It'd be more like kind of chess D&D, where it's certainty in how you position your bonuses and pluses. I'm playing devil's advocate here. Would it be possible or even feasible?
Feasible, yes. Fun, no.
All right. I think we've made our points here. So we kind of need them. All right. So. Yeah, dice and role-playing games go together, like peanut butter and jelly. Most modern games use them, or at least some random number generator. If they want to be fancy, they try some alternative, like the deck of cards you mentioned. And, of course, we have all those weird dice that people always associate with role-playing games. They are, of course, platonic solids, the one exception being the 10-sider, which is not a platonic solid, but still, it's a useful one. And there are also a bunch of other weird dice, like D30s and the infamous D100, which is basically just a ball with a bunch of flat surfaces on it and a little weight in the center. There's all sorts of weird dice, and gamers love them. But moving on, what other basic accoutrements do you think, Tyler, for most satisfying and fun role-playing games?
Some sort of mapping system and miniatures.
Yep, that's the next two things on my little list here. So a lot of role-playing games, the vast majority of them, possibly because of their wargaming roots, have pretty detailed rules on combat, and in order to run combats in a way that won't have people go back and forth on whether or not this person is 10 or 15 feet away, or whether or not he can see the orc in the bushes, you have to have some sort of modeling system, and therefore you need a map and you need miniatures. D&D, absolutely. I mean, that's, again, how it started. It was chainmail. It is possible to run a quick combat without using miniatures, but if you want to get anything more detailed, the bookkeeping is nightmarish. So, You need it. And miniatures, God, there are a whole variety of them. I mean, we could do an entire podcast on that alone. Some people really don't care what the miniatures are like, as long as they kind of resemble the things they're depicting. Other people are a little more hardcore and spend literally hundreds or thousands of dollars on fancy miniatures and decor and maps and paint them very nicely. I kind of fall on that, a little more on that side. I don't go to quite such extremes. What do you think, Tyler?
I'm closer to the middle ground. Yeah. I prefer having representational figures just because it makes an easy visual shorthand. You don't have to go, is that particular blue guy with a sword mine, or is that completely identical guy with a sword, but this time his clothes is yellow mine. You have two guys with swords, but they're different types of swords, different types of miniatures. Maybe one guy's in full plate and the other guy's dressed like he's sneaking down a dark alley somewhere. Then you know that the guy in full plate is the party warrior and the guy sneaking down a dark alley is the party rogue.
Yeah, so I mean, you could in theory just do it with like checkers or M&Ms. And yes, I did play with a guy who used M&Ms to represent enemies, and if you killed them, you got to eat the M&M. That was a fun little thing. I do tend more towards the emphasis on detail and realism of that, but I don't go that extreme for practical purposes. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it can be very simple and basic, but the more detailed, the more representative the miniatures are, the more immersion there is. And I kind of do like just kind of the pleasure of recreating the world in miniature before you. That's kind of I just enjoy that aspect of it. So those are kind of the basic accoutrements I have down my little list here. Anything else you can think of, Tyler?
Dice towers. While they're not as prevalent, people often like them because they don't allow, or because if you're using a dice tower, you can't do any fancy hand tricks in order to push the randomness in the direction that you want.
Yeah, I wouldn't say those are that essential. I've actually.
Oh, not essential, but they are popular.
Yeah, I would call those more aids than anything else. Yeah.
As far as essential goes, there's the defaults of paper for a character sheet, the actual book that you're using, whether it's digital or hard copy, and a pencil on which to write.
Yeah. Again,
or a pencil with which to write.
Again, if the rules were simple and everyone knew the rules, you could in theory do without it, but in practice, since you're trying to represent an entire reality, you need more than just a handwritten piece of paper if you want to have a more detailed and rich, complex experience. So let's move on to something else here. Props. I would say the difference between accoutrements and props are that props simply help immersion into the game and nothing more. So an example of that might be soundtrack or music. Would you agree, Tyler?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's also the classic DM screen.
Oh, yeah, actually, I almost put that on my basic accoutrement because it's kind of, this is kind of an aside, but I've seen some people never use screens and some people always use screens. I almost always use a screen. Tyler rarely uses a screen. He usually prefers his laptop, if anything. I'm more of an old-fashioned guy in that regard.
Well, I would put screens in the category of props because the side that faces the players often has depictions of different scenes from the game. And the prop aspect comes in that you could have scenes of deserts and mutant creatures if you're playing, say, a Dark Sun game.
Yeah, I can play that up. But I think it actually is more of an aid because it shields the GM's notes she has notes from prying eyes of players. It disguises die rolls, and it also often have some tables and useful information on the inside or even the outside for the players and or GM. So I would call that more of a role-playing aid. It can be a prop too, but I think it's more of an aid, an important one too at that.
Yeah, I think it falls into both categories.
More on the props, more on the aid side, but yeah. So soundtrack. I mean, I actually purchased a while back a CD with ambient background noise. So it had Dungeon, Enchanted Forest, Orcs. I thought it'd be really useful, but I never end up using a damn thing. Because in my experience, and Tyler may agree with me on this, soundtrack and ambient noises, it tends to be distracting and or annoying for a lot of people, myself included most of the time. Tyler?
I actually have to agree. However, there's a difference between having it... I found that long-running ambient noises tend to distract people. But if you have a encounter planned out, you can actually have a song or something like that fits the encounter queued up and ready to go. So when the encounter starts, you just hit play and have it set to a low volume, and it will accentuate the encounter.
I've never had much luck doing that. It just tends to, distract players, and eventually one player will not like the song and ask to have it shut off. It has to be something pretty universal appeal, or you have to know your group, or play at a low sound. I think some subtle ambient noises like Midnight Force or something, under the right circumstances, could be useful if they're used sparingly or at the right times. But in general, soundtrack and music and or ambient background noise is the sort of thing that sounds like a good idea, but just generally doesn't work out, for at least for me.
I found that songs that songs that are less vocal and more instrumental work out better because people aren't distracted by trying to make out the words.
Yeah. So are there other props, like handouts, for example, which I guess kind of cross over into role-playing aids, but let's say your players receive a note or a coded message, and instead of just describing it, you actually reach over the GM screen and hand them kind of a replication of that. These were very popular back in the older Advanced Dungeons & Dragons days, where there were a lot of prefab ventures, especially the box ones. They'd have these props you would hand to your players, and there would maybe be a clue in it or a puzzle or something. We don't see a lot of those anymore, at least not that I'm aware of, but I think they can be a lot of fun. Tyler?
I agree on that score, but they can also be really distracting. Also, but as far as handouts go, something that I have found to be very useful are cards that give like a brief description of items that are unique or fairly unique in the campaign. Like, let's say you have a campaign that's based around collecting 12 mythic swords, to go with an old freaking example from literature. Well, you can have each of the mythic swords written up on an index card with its abilities and personality and whatnot, and then you can hand them out, and whatever player has a hold or is holding on to the card at any given time is the player that has that sword.
Interesting take, yeah.
And then they don't have to ask, well, which sword of these casts Fireball 3 times a day? You look at the card, Fireball 3 times a day, caster level, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a neat way of doing it. It's like maybe almost think of them as like supplements to character sheets. It's something, instead of just writing down on your character sheets, I have a sword of +2 mithril, you actually get handed a card with it. That's actually an interesting take.
Something like a generic +2 mithril sword. That's probably actually better written on your character sheet. But something that has a fancy mechanic, or that has a special ability, or that has special significance in the game, that will often work better on an index card.
Sure, but I could kind of see a role-playing game where makes more liberal use of cards. Just it's probably counts more as a prop than an aid, because of all the shuffling. But I would think, actually holding it in your hand and having all your options there, I think that's kind of gets back to the Deadlands system, I guess. But I just think that would be an interesting take on it and an interesting supplement. True. Beyond that, we're getting kind of into nerdcore stuff here. There's decor. And yes, when I was in high school, I actually did purchase a little hollow ceramic dragon from a Renaissance fair, and purchased some incense and occasionally lit it up and let it burn during game. I freely admit that I'm better now, but I've done stuff like that.
Yes, he burned incense for gaming, right?
No, seriously, it was for gaming. I did not take drugs, if that's what you're thinking. You know me, Tyler.
I know you, but they don't. Damn it, you're ruining my joke.
I know, and it's caused me great joy ruining your joke.
Damn you.
So that's kind of going into the further realm. I mean, if you enjoy doing it, go for it. But I'm not too small to admit I get a little weirded out by the people who put on wizards hats as a GM and other little things like that. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, That's pushing it, or that's pushing role playing too far. That's pushing it into the area of LARPing. And if we're sitting down to throw dice, we're not standing up and walking around.
Well, still, I look at it kind of like the Shriners. It's goofy, it's stupid, it's silly, but if you enjoy it and you're not too ashamed of it, or you keep it to yourself, go nuts. This is a game. Games are supposed to be fun. So are you sure you've never done anything like that, Tyler?
You mean like put on different hats to play a game?
Or like incense and so forth, stuff that you might see if you were something you might see on, like, say, The Big Bang Theory, if they're trying, mocking geeks for doing their geeky stuff.
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, and
honestly, not that I'll admit, I've played role-playing games dressed in a leather jerkin dressed in a leather jerkin with a sword and a dueling dagger on my, and sheaths on my belt. But that was because I just got out of SCA practice.
Yeah.
I was actually playing a wizard at the time.
Yeah. And of course, LARPing, that's might be the topic of an entire podcast in itself. And in that case, aids, role-playing aids, supplements, and props, that's pretty much, it becomes a necessity. That is LARPing, basically. It's taken to the next level, or the lower level yeah. So we'll just leave it at that. So that kind of covers some basic accoutrements and props. Do you have anything you want to add, Tyler?
As far as accoutrements and props go, I had something in mind, and it completely slipped out the memory hole.
Oh, like
this is what happens when we do the podcast so close to the end of my pill cycle.
Fair enough. So let's talk about a few more aids. Role playing. These are like aids, things that assist make the game go smoother. Like, one example I think of off the bat is the initiative counter that one of our players uses to keep track of initiative while the game is playing. Instead of writing down on a piece of paper, it's like a little draw erase board. And he actually can, with the magnetic strips, where he can move the names of players up and down the initiative ladder. And so you can quite easily keep track of who goes when.
As well as what rounds different duration ends on. I have to admit that thing is insanely useful.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of little aids like that, like other examples might be like getting into the miniature category, are like in a magazine I saw these little round counters you can put underneath miniatures that indicate by a color code whether they're unconscious, sleeping, poisoned, wounded, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I've seen those too. I really don't like them. Not because it's a bad idea. It's a good idea. It's an idea I had a while ago and I've been trying to actually get implemented. I don't like them because they're face up, which means your miniature base has to be smaller than the face up that you're looking at, or you have to be using over the standard 1 inch diameter or 1 inch on a side square or 1 inch on a side squares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which means you can't have miniatures right next to each other. It's one of those good idea, bad implementation things.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. So we've talked about most of these aids and props and accoutrements have been analog.
Which actually brings up something that I saw a while back. They were handcrafted, but they were still really useful, and they were battle standards. They were little cups that you would put your miniature onto, and they held onto the square base of the miniature. And there was an elf bend that came with the back of the miniature that was made out of metal, and you could put magnets on that L bend. And those refrigerator magnets that people have have numbers and stuff on them. Well, that's what they would use them for. It's like, okay, this guy has 5 damage. Let's put a number 5 on that. He has 15. Move the 5 down, put a 1 above it.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
Yeah. That was really clever.
Yeah, so the key thing here is they have to be quick and easy to use and help keep track of something or help chart something. So basically it takes away a lot of the number crunching from the role-playing itself. That's what's really useful for a lot of these aids.
Making the game run smoother, faster, and not being more immersive, but being less distracting really is the hallmark of a good aid or prop.
Yeah, and it helps immersion by decreasing
distraction.
Well, I was about to get into there was that all these aids and props have all been mostly analog. So There have actually been like GM assistant software around for quite a long time. I bought an older version of an AD&D GM's assist program. Are there any ones you can think of, Tyler?
I can think of a few. Yeah. But actually, I just remembered what fell out the memory
let's take care of that first. Go ahead.
Laser pointers. Specifically the kind that makes a line.
Yeah, that would be a useful... That's a good idea for a prop. Or, sorry, for an aid, yeah.
Just so you can chart to see if, like, does my line of fire go through this figure or through this obstruction on the battle grid that we were talking about? Yeah,
and one thing that a lot of people, especially in games where they use the hex or the actual square system, and that's most games, is simple measuring tape, because sometimes you have to measure an effect that goes a very long way or a long movement, and you start counting up the squares or hexes between point A and point B, when most of the time the distance, all those hexes or squares are like 1 inch or 1 inch and a half. Just get some measuring tape. That makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I have a roll of flexible measuring tape for like tailoring and stuff like that I use, because then you can go, or because oftentimes when you want to move a figure, you have to go around corners and such, so you'll have, like, say, 12 inches of movement. Well, you just chart out 12 inches on the tape, and then you move the flexible tape around.
Yeah. All right, so getting off that digression, so what are these software aids you mentioned you can think of, Tyler?
One is software, and the other is a software-hardware hack. The software aid that I'm thinking of is the D20 Pro tabletop, which is a virtual tabletop system that people can log into, and you can program in or adopt in rule books and tile sets and whatnot. And one person has the DM controls, so they're like controlling everything that everybody sees, what displays, what has fog of war, what doesn't. And the other people who are logged into that session will see only their own specific character information, not the universal information that that the DM has access to. That way, you can have multiple people participating in a game across a large distance.
Yeah, I mean, these are becoming very popular, and it's kind of the best of both worlds. You have the computer system handling a lot of the rules. It can provide a pretty nice display of the game, especially the GM puts a lot of work into it. And a lot of people play that now. I know a lot of people who do that.
The other one is the Cast AR glasses. Cast AR is a Kickstarter piece of hardware, and with a integrated software, obviously, that's a low price entry point for virtual reality glasses. But the fidelity on them is better than you get from freaking anything else. And on top of that, they're not virtual reality glasses. They're augmented reality glasses that are capable of displaying a holographic image. And you take an adapter and you click it over the lenses, and when you do, they turn into virtual reality glasses.
So yeah, we're getting very high tech with some of these immersion / distraction reducing devices.
Oh, that's not the end of it. The way the Cast AR glasses work is they have a stereoscopic view stereoscopic view radar receivers that allow them to broadcast and pick up low frequency RFID tags. And you can use these RFID tags. You put one here, put one there, and that describes your playing environment so that you can then move around the room and look, whichever direction your head is pointing, But also, they can be used to tell the location of RFID elements inside the room. So what the demonstration version of them does is you put on a glove with RFID tags glued to the fingertips, and the glasses will see the glove as chart the location of those RFID tags, knows one is for thumb, one is for index, so on and so forth, and will chart the location of the hand. You can even type on a virtual keyboard, move a virtual mouse, all that fun stuff. But also, you can take an RFID tag, and those things are insanely cheap these days. glue it onto the bottom of a miniature, and you can see the miniature, or just glue it onto the bottom of a blank base and see a virtual miniature that's moving around.
Nice.
Now, the awesome part about this is it all feeds into a database of XYZ coordinate location information, and that same database can be relatively easily. I say relatively, but I'm a computer programmer, so take this with a grain of salt. Relatively easily converted to the same type of XYZ coordinate information that's used in, say, a online virtual presence gaming system, like D20 Pro that I just mentioned. Not that I'm thinking about doing this, of course.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. I mean, some companies are kind of anticipating this. I mean, bad example, but the newest edition of D&D is kind of assuming you'll be doing some online and electronic role-playing and has like a system set up for accommodating that.
Yeah, but who the hell plays it?
Good question. I mean, it seems like most people want to play D&D these days, either play our games, D&D Edition Pi, check out our website, or they play Pathfinder, which is basically D&D 3.1 or something.
Yeah, it's really when they did the whole fourth edition bullshit, Hasbro just completely shat all over their own property. But Hasbro being Hasbro, it isn't like they're ever going to admit to it.
And they'll never ever license the game or the rules to anyone unless you pay a substantially absurd fee for it or something very strange happens. Yeah, but this isn't a podcast episode. Let's rag on D&D and Hasbro as it is right now, because we're actually towards the end of the topics, or at least the ones on my list. Is there anything else you want to add, Tyler?
I think I just got done ranting about the two things that I'm most looking forward to already.
Oh, okay. So in that case, let me just finish by kind of asking this. Despite all these new high-tech toys, all this immersion through computers and possibly augmented reality, I can still see kind of appeal just for sitting down with a book, a map, some miniatures, and at best a calculator. Why do you think that is, Tyler?
Because there's no such thing as VR pizza.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds as cliched as it sounds. Well, there's that too. But I think as cliche as it sounds, the imagination can still do better in some regards than the most sophisticated augmented reality or the fanciest and most efficient computer-based system. And there's a difference between hearing someone, seeing someone text, "I attack the darkness" on a computer screen, or even seeing them via Skype or something and seeing a talking head ask it, than seeing a person right next to you and smell the Cheetos in his mouth. There's just something about...
Well, there's a reason lit RPG novels always seem to use the caveat that there's an artificial intelligence system or multiple artificial intelligence systems running the various game world elements, and that's because if your RPG is the same thing over and over and over again, it gets boring really fast. Been there, done that. Well, people play games for novelty and for escapism. But if all there is escapism, it loses half the appeal.
Well, I mean, what's the appeal of like role about not using all these aids, just keeping it simple?
Yeah, because people are more complex and less predictable than a computer program.
All right, kind of what I'm getting at, but I think that pretty much is a good place to end on that note. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I asked for the fourth time.
2 plus 2 is 4, except for extremely small values of 2 or extremely large values of 4.
Okay, Mr. Eigenvector. This has been the Daemoneye Podcast, Episode 13, Role-Playing Aids, Props, and Accouterments. I'm Tristan Eifler.
I'm the guy who killed your parents.
He is. And we shall see you next time.